Yo, welcome back guys to another video. It is Wizard101, and in today's video, as you can see by the title, it is a Wizard101 schools tier list. And yeah, pretty straightforward in terms of like the overall concept of the video, but we're going to be ranking all 7 schools based off 3 things. We're going to be basing it off their damage and output, so essentially how well they kill their opponents, so like mobs, bosses, and just overall how they are in team up as well, and also just when you're in dungeons and whatnot too, like your go-to schools. We're also going to be doing health and resist, so what schools have good health and resist compared to the other schools. And we're also going to be having enjoyment, just overall enjoyment out of just playing the school. So those are the 3 things we're going to be basing it on. My personal experience with these schools, I have a max balance, I have a close to max storm, I have around a level 80 death and around a level 50 myth, I have around a level 20 fire and stuff. So I've got, and my ice and life are like level 10, so I've gotten my I guess fair like understanding of schools. I haven't had the full experience in some of them, but I have a decent understanding of what enjoyment I find in school. So yeah, I'm just going to be ranking them. Obviously it is my opinion, but at the end of the day I'm going to be basing it off some objective things within the game, which a lot of people would agree with anyways. But let's jump into the first one, which is by the bottom here. It is balance. So balance right here. Alright, so if we go based off of just damage and output as the first ranking, it's going to be mid to low tier. I just think personally for me as a balance who was soloing, I really struggled hard, just because it's hard to get the damage with the kind of the way the gear is set up for you. Like you're a support character, so you're not going to be getting the gear that you'd be getting, like obviously it's pretty self-explanatory, but like your storm, fire, and miss. So but it's not terrible at the same time. But in terms of that, there is a couple spells which are decent. So you do get your AoE at level 22, which is Sandstorm. Decent AoE for that level. It's not great, but it just gets the job done for a little bit. And obviously at level 48 you get your Power Nova spell, which is your 7-pip AoE, which again is a very strong spell. It's one of the stronger 7-pip AoEs in the game, so it is actually quite good, but you do have to wait until level 48. You also do get Judgment, which is the best single hit targeting spell in the game. It's essentially it's got X pips, which means depending on how many pips you have, you do Y amount of damage, so it's really good. And yeah, so in terms of that, it's probably mid to low tier. I'd say in health and resist it is definitely up there, and I think for balance at least, it's always been strong. Like you don't really have to struggle with accuracy, you don't really have to struggle with the amount of health you have. Like if you go to max level, you're going to be easily having 11-12k health with like your Aeon or like Reaver gear, so you're going to be fine, or even like Xenopolis gear or guild gear. Also on top of that, you're going to just have good resist, so the base level resist for a balanced wizard is I think around second to is like top 2, top 3. So that is again very, very strong, and then pair that with a good pet as well, you're set. Like you'll be able to be a good tank, good support, but you're kind of able to go each way. And I'd say overall enjoyment I had at the school was, I'd say, pretty decent. Might be a little bit biased because it was my first ever max wizard, and I've kind of been rocking a balance since I first started playing the game. But for me, balance is just an enjoyable school. If you have the right people to play with, you find enjoyment out of just kind of grinding the game a little bit differently and working a little bit harder. I wouldn't recommend it as your first wizard, however, but I'd say that if it's your second or third wizard and you like the grind of the game and you've already completed a wizard, I'd say balance is definitely on the cards. It's a very fun wizard to go with, and I found a lot of enjoyment playing it, so I don't see why you couldn't as well. Alright, but for that, we're going to put it into C tier. So I just think C tier suits this school really well. It's probably low B, C tier. This is also based on PvE rankings, so don't be too stressed if you're a PvE player or looking into advanced combat as such, but balance would be like up here if it was that case. But in terms of PvE, it's a C tier school. Alrighty, so death. In terms of PvE, we're going to base it off a couple of things again, like balance in the other schools, damage and output. So damage and output, to be fair, balance is not balance. Death is actually decently good. It's probably that mid tier to high, like I'd say like B tier range, like high B tier range in terms of damage. Like does have good output if you have the right gear, spells, not spells, pets, and you know, just like jewels and stuff. Like if you have all that kind of set up at lower levels, you'll be really good. But the base level is kind of kind of mid to decent. Like it's not nothing too flashy, but you can work with it definitely. I think also on top of that, just purely because of the damage output and getting half the health back with spells, like your vampire, your ghoul, your scarecrow, which is a big one. Also, if you do have Ship of Fools, which is a spell, if you have those, well then, you know, it's going to be much easier, and it's really good for those boss fights when you're soloing. It does take a little bit longer in terms of like playing through the game, but it does make it a lot easier, if that makes a whole lot of sense. So you're gonna be kind of guaranteed that health. You're gonna be able to regen your health. You're gonna be able to stay prepped for the next fight, or stay prepped throughout the fight. And yeah, also on top of that, the spells you do get. So Death is one of the only schools which doesn't get a 4-pip AoE, which is a bit of a shame. It does get Ship of Fools, which is 2-pip or 4-pip sort of thing, but that is a lore spell, so you do have to get spellments or buy packs for it. Bit of a shame. However, at level 48 you do get Scarecrow, which is considered one of the top 7-pip AoE spells, because obviously you do, I think it's around 700-ish damage, a bit lower, maybe like 670 or something between that, and you do get half the health back. So if you pair that with like a good like an epic or a monstrous, or like a colossus or something like that, when you reach those certain levels, it is very strong and it does a lot of damage, and also you do get your health back, so it is very good. In terms of those other spells, it's kind of like that mid tier. You're going to be just using Scarecrow all of the time, so in terms of like enjoyment, I'd say like you could get bored of it. But like if you do find enjoyment out of just, you know, cruising through the game and stuff like that, well then I'd say you'd have a lot of fun. It is definitely a very good solo school, and a school that I'd recommend if you really wanted to start off with. Definitely is a good option. It wouldn't be your first, but I'd say it's a good option. And in terms of health and resist, it is that, again, that kind of decent to mid tier range. It's nothing too flashy, but you can work with it. So Death overall is kind of just that mid tier range school. It's not bad. It can be great in a lot of aspects, but also can't be amazing in some aspects. However, that doesn't mean it's bad whatsoever. It's a decent to great school. So I'm going to pop it in B tier at the moment, and that's just going to be my ranking for it. Alrighty, so we go to the next school now. It is Fire. So Fire is definitely a interesting school to talk about, because in terms of damage and output is definitely up on the high tier, with its just in terms of gear, like you get just the gear is very good for Fire, especially PvE. You know, the gear you do get throughout Mount Olympus to Waterworks to Darkmoor all the way until max level, the Fire is very well supported in that aspect of the game, and yeah, it makes it a very strong school. And the spells you do get as well, so you get Meteor Strike at level 22, is just a very good AoE spell. Highly recommend getting on that if that's your first, so very good. And on top of that, also you get Fire Dragon at level 48, which isn't as great, but still a very good 7-pip AoE. And just on top of that, throughout the game you get a lot of good spells. Like when you do get to around that Arcanum range level, once again very strong. A lot of the spells are really good, so highly recommend that there. But in terms of what makes, in my opinion, Fire really good is it's just balanced, and it's balanced stats, which are not just balanced in mid-range like balance is. It's great. It's great. It's great at everything essentially. So damage and output, it's high tier, it's very strong. But then also on top of that, you have its health and resist, which again is very strong. A lot of the gear and also high level gear does favor Fire quite a lot. So again, I'm going to be putting it in that kind of A to B tier range when it comes to health and resist, along with it being in that A tier range of damage as well. And yeah, it's very similar to Myth, where it gets a lot of health and resist, and it's just overall very strong, and it gets a lot of damage. So just an amazing school at higher level, and also just throughout the entire game. But on top of that, also you have its enjoyment, and I personally think Fire is a very enjoyable school. Even though I haven't got it to a high level, I have found enjoyment out of playing it. I've only been playing it for a few weeks, but when I've had time to, and I found enjoyment. And again, it is a very strong school. So you have a enjoyable time being able to hit, being able to do damage, being able to survive, and have that enjoyment out of, you know, not having the struggle to blade yourself and survive through fights, because you have that health and resist, which again goes hand in hand. So yeah, and if you do have some support school like your balance, ice, and lives, well then you're sorted. You can make your gameplay overall just so much more enjoyable. So for me, I'm going to be putting fire in A tier at the moment, but it could definitely be S tier. Alright, next one is ice. So ice is the tank school, quote unquote, and it most definitely is. So ice is very, very strong when it comes to health and resist. It is, again, number one in that aspect. It has amazing health and resist throughout its gear. So Mount Olympus all the way to through max level. Ice is going to be that school which is just going to be able to get a lot of health and resist, and it's going to be able to tank for you. And it also is an amazing support school with its spells like Legion Shield, Tower Shield, being able to train obviously Elemental Blade and whatnot from the balance school tree. Again, that just makes it a whole lot easier. And it just has a lot of spells, which again, if you're pairing that with a storm, a fire, or a myth, even maybe potentially a death, it's going to make it a whole lot easier for questing and being able to take that damage and, you know, go first in battle. Like, it's just a very strong school in that aspect. However, when it comes to soloing and the damage and output, this is where it makes it really a struggle. You're not always going to be able to play with friends when you're playing Wiz, especially if you don't play with anybody. It's going to be a lot harder. And ice makes that a lot more difficult, especially with its spells. It does get Blizzard at level 22, but it is the weakest 4-pip AoE, and it also doesn't get many strong spells in between. At level 48, it does get a 7-pip AoE, Frost Giant. However, again, it is on the lower tier end of that. It does get, I think, an okay amount of damage, but then it stuns, and it's sort of a little bit pointless. Like, it's just doesn't really help you out at that level. Again, it doesn't make it impossible, but it doesn't make it amazing, especially if you already don't have a great pet or if you don't have a good setup. It's going to be a lot harder, and it's just going to make questing, personally for me, not as enjoyable. However, you can find enjoyment out of playing it, especially if you know, if it's like your second or third wizard and you've had that experience with a decent school like a fire or a storm or a death, and you're moving on to an ice. You want to have that kind of change of scenery with being more of a support player, and you have somebody to support in that aspect, like a higher hitting school, then it's going to be okay. It's going to be an enjoyable experience if you're just going through that. And I think it is a cool school. I'm not bashing on ice like I am a little, but I'm not trying to bash on ice too much. Like, by no means is it a terrible school in terms of like all aspects, but it just, for PvE and enjoyment, I just put it in C tier. I just don't give it a great rep because I just don't think a lot of people find the enjoyment as they can. It's kind of like a little bit of a boring school, but nonetheless, you can find enjoyment out of it if you have the right setup and whatnot. And yeah, moving on to Life School. So Life School, again, is similar to Balance and Ice. That is a very high health supporting school. It's going to have a lot of resist as well on top of that, and that also makes it very good. So Life is also the healing school of the game. It does get a lot of the healing spells in the game. You have some of the best healing spells in the game, such as Seder and Rebirth. It's just amazing support spells, and just, they're unmatched. No other school gets even close to that when it comes to health and healing. So, and also you do get lore spells like Pigsy. So it is very good in that aspect, and that kind of just gives it its little own, I guess, like branch that it can kind of lean onto when it comes to not just having its damage and output and resist. It can also just, branch out into being a little bit more of like a defensive school and healing your team if you have a long dungeon, and it's really good in that aspect. And on top of that, I think personally that having that aspect of it makes it just an amazing school. And also its health and resist are very, very high. So max level, it can get upwards of 15k health if you obviously have the right jewels and whatnot, and it's just unreal. And resist wise, it is very, very strong. Damage and output though, however, I'd put it on the mid tier to lower tier, just because at a max level, you don't get really amazing pierce or stuff like that. You do get good damage, but you don't get amazing pierce or accuracy, which is a bit of a shame. They kind of shafted Life on that aspect. But also on top of that, lower levels, the spells aren't great. You only get 1 7-pip AoE on one AoE spell, which is a part of like your normal spell training, which would be Forest Lord at level 48. So you got to wait 48 levels to obtain that. And in between that, the way to get a good AoE spell is by, again, spending money on the game, getting Ratska's Spin. And it is an amazing spell. However, if you're a free-to-play player and it's something that you don't want to do by spending money, well, you can farm it. However, it's going to be a lot harder, and I farmed it obviously, but again, it is not very easy to obtain. However, enjoyment wise, I think you can find a lot of enjoyment out of life. I most definitely have. I'm really excited to continue questing. So for me, I'm going to put life in B tier. For me personally, I don't know if that's a bit weird, but I like life. I think it's a good school. Anyways, let's move on to the next one. So the next school we have here is Myth. So Myth again is like similar to its Death and Fire counterparts. It is a very, very strong school. So let's get started on it. So in terms of damage and output, I put Myth as around the A tier for me. Like in terms of PvE, like Myth is very, very strong. He gets all the spells that you want. It gets a lot of just strong spells. It gets a lot of the right spells. It's not really any bad in that aspect. And on top of that, also it gets amazing damage at even like mid-level to higher level, especially if you pair it with the right gear. Oh man, that it is just cracked. And I'd give it a really good strong rating on that aspect for me. For Myth, it's very, very strong. And on top of that, also, I think that, getting Humongo Frog, sorry, at level 22, very, very strong AoE 4 pip. And then also getting a 7 pip AoE in Orthrus at level 48. Two of the strongest AoE spells in the game in terms of their like respective pip. And it's very, very strong. And that's why I do recommend it, because it doesn't make it a whole lot harder. And on top of that, also, just Myth in terms of its damage, in terms of its health and resist, is very, very, very strong. It being one of the highest health and resist schools when it comes to the right gear when you go to higher levels. It's very, very strong. Even to mid to low tier level, it's still pretty good. You get decent resist after you get around that Waterworks level and start getting universal resist and stuff like that. If you pair it with a good pet, well, you're sorted once again. And on top of that, also, it's maybe not as good as your life balance and ice, but it is very, very strong because it's not too far away, but it gets significantly better damage, which makes it a lot stronger, which makes it a very, very strong school. And in terms of enjoyment, I've been questing my Myth quite a bit lately, and man, have I been loving it. Like spells, just the whole feel of the school, being able to kind of just cruise along soloing, it is amazing, and it's a very strong school. And I just feel like it's just a school which you can always fall back on to being quite strong. It isn't weak by any means. It's not terrible in any aspect. Like maybe, yes, it doesn't really heal, but it gets some amazing spells and does amazing damage and health and resist. So in terms of PvE, it is incredibly strong. And I give it its flowers when it comes to that. Like it's just an overall just good school. Like you can't go wrong with it. And if I were starting out on Wizard101, like I've said in my previous videos, I would go Myth. And that's why for me, I'm putting in an A tier. And here we go. The damage school of Wizard101 is Storm. Kind of self-explanatory to a lot of people. You'd think Fire or Storm, right? Well, Storm is there. Storm is number one. It is always going to be number one. And for that reason, damage and output, it is S tier. It is amazing. Like the spells you get, unreal. So you get yourself at level 22 X pip Tempest, which similar to Judgment, you have X amount of pips, it's going to do Y amount of damage, and it is AoE, so it does damage to all of its enemies, all the enemies. Crazy spell. And on top of that, also at level 48 you get Stormlord. Stormlord is one of the best 7 pip AoEs in the game. I think I rated around second to third, probably around second, I'd say, just behind Orthrus. Very, very, very strong. I rated incredibly high, and also does get a cheeky stun if you if you rate that as well. So that's a very, very good spell. When it comes to its Darkmoor spell, which again I fell in love with it, you get Glowbugs. Glowbugs maybe a little while ago used to be the best spell in terms of AoE, because Shad used to be really strong, but in terms of like just getting like that, very, very strong. You get some of the highest hitting spells in the entire game. Like you're just gonna have enjoyment out of that. The only problem you're gonna have is accuracy at lower levels, which can be sorted around Waterworks and Mount Olympus even, and it just makes it, not that as difficult when you get to the high levels. Like when you get to max level, or like even after level 100, after you get Darkmoor, you get Malice's Cale of Flux, which is, I think, gives 25 base accuracy, which is nuts. Like, dude, you're not going to have any issues for the rest of the game, so don't even worry about that. It is just amazing in that aspect. And yeah, Storm in terms of damage and output is S tier. You also get a lot of other good spells throughout the game. Like when you get max level, you get Bunyip's Rage, which is again the best, like I believe it's 3 pip, but like 5 pip spell, if you know what I mean, and it is very, very strong. So that is, again, that's the best like second turn spell or first turn spell that you can use. And yeah, so very, very strong as well. I mean, health and resist. Okay, this is where it's going to kind of fall off a little bit. This is where I'd put it in the lowest tier. Health and resist for Storm is very, very weak. You're not going to get amazing health. You're not going to get amazing resist. You can still manage like around 30 to 40 resist at max level, a bit higher maybe, but, and like maybe around 9 to 10k health, or maybe even a little bit less, but you're kind of just giving that up on having a lot of damage, which, because the whole objective of the Storm is to end the fights fast, quickly do it, kind of finish the fight, not have any trouble. And that's why like Storm is a very fun school for a lot of people, because you're having quick battles, you're having a lot of fun, you're having spells which are just going to do a lot of damage, and it kind of makes it easy. But if you go into longer length battles and have trouble, well, you're sort of going to be a little bit screwed, because it makes it a lot harder to sort of just be able to like stay in the fight, and then, you know, kind of weaken the opponent when you're doing those dungeons or whatnot. But however, if you're paired with like an ice or a balance and other schools throughout dungeons, like it's just an amazing school. And for that reason, I love Storm. And yeah, that's why for enjoyment, I again put it at S tier. Like S tier for me, like I came from using my max level balance to doing my Storm at the minute, and it's around level 150. What, like, dude, it is crazy. Like having Merciless gear on that guy and doing all the damage it does, it's just unreal, man. And for that reason, I put it in S tier overall. Like I just think Storm is the best PvE school by far. And for that reason, that's the tier list we've come to, guys. Personally for me, I think this is pretty objective. I tried to make this as least subjective as possible, especially with me being a balanced wizard primarily. So put that guy in C tier. Other than that, I think that's a fair ranking. I think that for a lot of people that would kind of agree with this rating. I don't think there's much you can change. Not to say that ice and balance aren't usable in their own aspects. They have an amazing school, but just overall experience, and I'm counting like a lot of things, and I counted all those categories that I'm talking about. That's where they've kind of put, that's where it's kind of put me to put them. But yeah, anyways guys, I hope you find this video enjoyable, and I hope you guys, you know, maybe take away something from this little bit of a tier list. But also let me know by dropping down in the comments what you guys think of where you'd rank the schools, if you'd change anything, and let me know what school you first started on, because I'd love to know. I love chatting to you guys as well. But also make sure, if you aren't already, join my Discord server. I'll put a link in the description and also put it on screen here. Absolutely just love the community I'm trying to build. So I just want to get more people to join so they can see my content, and we're going to start trying to do a lot more things. And also on top of that, I do stream over on Twitch at twitch.tv/Lockies101. So if you're interested in interacting with me live and talking to me more often, I stream quite often. So make sure you check me out over there. But yeah, anyways, it's been Lockies101, guys. I hope you had a lovely time watching my video, and peace.